Brought to you by Penguin.
The Chimp Paradox, written and read by Dr. Steve Peters. Introduction. The Journey. Choosing the Sun. Listening to this book will take you on a journey of self-discovery and development. By understanding and applying the concepts within it, you'll not only improve the quality of your life, but also significantly increase your chances of being happy and successful in whatever you do. The book is based around a model that I have developed called Chimp Management, which has helped many people understand themselves and learn how to work with their emotions. Some parts of the book will resonate with you more strongly than others. Select those parts that are relevant to you and work with them. In my work as a psychiatrist and lecturer, people typically present me with comments or questions that are usually centred on problems that they don't understand or can't solve. These questions and statements are endless, so I'm now going to give a stream of examples and see how many that you can relate to, and then we'll address them throughout the book. How do I become the person that I would like to be? I want to be confident in myself. How do I become more organised and successful in what I do? Why do I worry so much? How do I become a more effective leader? I want to be happy. How do I stop worrying about what others think? Why can't I make decisions? How do I motivate myself? Why do I have such a low opinion of myself? How do I stop emotions that prevent me from reaching my professional potential? I drink too much. Why do I often act against common sense? My moods just go up and down. How do I stop overeating? Why do I sometimes become so irrational in my thinking? I can't control my anger. Why can't I remain faithful? I can't get on with my boss. Why do I feel judged all the time? How do I make my relationship work? And the list goes on. How we'll go through the journey. Chimp Management is based on scientific facts and principles, which have been simplified into a workable model for easy use. It will help you to answer the questions that we've just gone through, develop yourself and give you the skills, for example, to remove anxiety, have confidence and choose your emotions. The book will do this by giving you an understanding of the way in which your mind works and how you can manage it. It will help you to identify what is holding you back or preventing you from having a happier and more successful life. Each chapter explains different aspects of how you function and highlights key facts for you to understand. There are exercises for you to work through. By undertaking these exercises, you will see immediate improvements in your daily living, and over time, you will develop emotional skills and practical habits that will help you to become the person that you want to be and live the life that you want to live. We'll consider 7 different areas to work on. Your inner mind, understanding and relating to others, communication, the world in which you live, your health, your success, and your happiness. To help you to understand and visualize these areas better, each will be represented by a planet, some of which have their own moons to stabilize them. The 7 planets and their moons come together to form the psychological universe within your head. I will introduce each planet as we go through the journey across this universe, which of course strictly speaking is a solar system. Just as the sun is the centre of the physical solar system, your sun is the centre of your psychological universe and represents self-fulfillment and what you believe to be the meaning and purpose of your life. The sun has the best chance of shining when all of the 7 planets in your universe are spinning correctly and in harmony. Therefore, in order to make your sun shine, you have to work on each area in your life and get it into a good place. This is why I've made them into 7 planets with moons so that you can work specifically on specific areas. So let's choose the sun and begin our journey of self-discovery and life-changing attitudes. Part 1. Your Inner Mind Explored. Chapter 1. The Psychological Mind. As we begin our journey across the universe, we need to have a basic understanding of what is inside our head and how it works. The human brain is complicated, so we will look at a simplified version. It's easiest to consider the human brain as a system of 7 brains working together. They all have complicated names, but they could be classed as the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the limbic system, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Within the Chimp Management model, 3 of these brains, the frontal, limbic, and parietal, combine to form the psychological mind, and we will only look at these brains. Remember that scientifically, this is far from accurate, but it will give us a working model. Strictly speaking, the other brains significantly contribute to emotions, thinking, and memory, but for our purposes, we will dramatically simplify things. The 3 psychological brains in our model, the frontal, limbic, and parietal, are called the human, the chimp, and the computer. For convenience, we'll let the parietal lobe represent many parts of the brain, which makes things much more straightforward. Although these 3 brains try to work together, they very frequently get into conflict and struggle against each other to gain control, with the chimp, the limbic brain, often winning. So while we're setting the scene, now try to visualize 3 separate brains in your head working together: the human, the chimp, and the computer. And together, these 3 separate brains make up the psychological mind. Introducing the chimp. When you're in the womb, 2 different brains, the frontal human and limbic chimp, an emotional machine, developed independently and then introduced themselves to each other by forming connections. The problem is that they found they were not in agreement about most things. Either of these 2 brains or beings could run your life for you, but they try to work together, and therein is the problem. The human and chimp have independent personalities with different agendas, different ways of thinking, and different modes of operating. Effectively, there are 2 beings in your head. It's important to grasp that only one of these beings is you, the human. The chimp is an emotional machine that we all possess. It thinks independently from us and can make decisions. It offers emotional thoughts and feelings that can be very constructive or very destructive. It's not good or bad, it's a chimp. The chimp paradox is that it can be your best friend and your worst enemy, even at the same time. The main purpose of this book is to help you to manage your chimp and to harness its strength and power when it is working for you and to neutralize it when it is not. Key point. The chimp is an emotional machine that thinks independently from us. It is not good or bad, it is just a chimp. When people have accidents that damage their frontal lobe or where they have a disorder or illness affecting the frontal lobe, their personality alters. Effectively, the human part of the brain stops working and the new personality that presents is the chimp. Very often, people affected in this way will become disinhibited and lose their judgment, or they can become apathetic or have outbursts of aggressive behaviour. The case of Phineas Gage. An early example that demonstrated there could be 2 different personalities in one head, represented by the human and chimp, was that of Phineas Gage. In the late 19th century, Gage was employed by a railway company to clear the way for the track layers by blowing away any boulders that were too big to move manually. To do this, he packed explosives beneath the boulder and then tamped it down with a thick iron rod before lighting the fuse. Gage had been chosen to do this dangerous work because he was judged to be careful, sober, and responsible. However, one time Gage allowed himself to be distracted at a crucial moment and caused the rod to strike the boulder, which created a spark. The resulting explosion jettisoned the iron bar into Gage's eye socket, through the front of his head and out the top of his skull. As it exited, it took with it a clean core of brain tissue from his frontal lobe, which is the human. Apart from being blind in one eye, Gage made a full recovery. However, his personality was completely altered. He became foul-mouthed, aggressive and impulsive. Effectively, his human had gone, and he was now left with just a chimp. You can recognise the difference between your chimp thinking and human thinking without knowing any of the science. How many times have you talked to yourself, reassured yourself, or had battles within your own head? Often you have thoughts and feelings that you do not want, and even carry out behaviours that you know at the time are not really what you want to do. So why are you doing this? How can it be that you do not have control over what thoughts or emotions you have and what behaviours you carry out? How can you be two very different people at different times? Technology can go some way to answering this question. Functional brain scanners show the blood supply in your brain going to the area that's being used. If you think calmly and rationally, then we can see the blood supply going to the frontal area, the human in your head, and you become the person that you want to be and that you really are. If you become emotional and somewhat irrational, especially when you're angry or distressed, then we see the blood supply go to your chimp, and you would usually say this is not how you want to be and that you don't want this. The truth is that it is your chimp, an emotional machine that is overpowering your human. This starts to explain many things, such as why you worry, or why you say things in the heat of the moment and then regret them, or why you can't stop eating, or why you don't exercise when you really want to, but just can't get your act together. The list is endless. Wonder no more. It is not you doing these things, it's your chimp that is hijacking you. Having a chimp is like owning a dog. You're not responsible for the nature of the dog, but you are responsible for managing it and keeping it well behaved. This is a very important point, and you should stop and think about this because it is crucial to your happiness and success in life. Key point. You are not responsible for the nature of your chimp, but you are responsible for managing it. The chimp within. To reiterate, the chimp within your head is a separate entity to you. It was born when you were born, but actually has nothing to do with you as a human. It is simply part of your machinery. For example, when you were born, you were given a certain colour of eyes. You didn't choose this colour, it was given to you. It was in your genes. There isn't much you can do about it, so you accept your eye colour and get on with your life. Similarly, you didn't choose your chimp, it was given to you and you need to accept it. It has a mind of its own and thinks with original thoughts that are not yours. It is a living machine that is built to serve a purpose, which is to ensure the next generation. It has a personality of its own and it can run your life for you, usually not very well, but it can do it. It is an extremely powerful emotional machine. You might wish to give your chimp a name and introduce yourself because it plays one of the biggest parts in your life. Throughout your life, you, the human, and your chimp, your emotional thinking machine, will often do battle. Key point. One of the secrets of success and happiness is to learn to live with your chimp and not get bitten or attacked by it. To do this, you need to understand how your chimp behaves and why it thinks and acts in the way that it does. You also need to understand your human and not muddle up your human with your chimp. The psychological mind, therefore, has two independent thinking machines that also independently interpret our experiences. The two beings that interpret are the human, that is you, and lives in your frontal lobe, and your chimp, your emotional machine, given to you at birth and lives in your limbic system. The third part of the psychological mind. The psychological mind also has a storage area for thoughts and behaviours called the computer, which is spread throughout the whole brain. The computer is used for storage of information and for reference. The computer stores information that the chimp or human has put into it. It then uses this information to act for them in an automatic way, or it can serve as a reference point. So now that you have a basic understanding of what is inside your head, let's start the journey across the psychological universe. We can see how you're operating with your human, chimp, and computer in different circumstances, and how you can use them to your advantage and understand yourself better. Here are some summary key points. The psychological mind is made up of three separate brains: the human, the chimp, and the computer. You are the human. Your chimp is an emotional thinking machine. Your computer is a storage area and automatic functioning machine. Any one of them can take complete control, but usually they work together. A suggested exercise is to have development time. What is development time and why have it? Simply put, development time is time specifically set aside that is dedicated to reflecting on how you're managing yourself. You'll benefit most from the model of the chimp, the human and the computer, if you spend time thinking through the concepts involved and then implementing them. The best way to make sure that you have established development time is to make it into a habit. Habits are formed when they're easy to do. Therefore, setting aside a specific time in the day that is sacrosanct for development thinking will increase your chance of it happening regularly. This session must be easy to do, otherwise your chimp won't agree and you won't do it. So making the session just 10 minutes long is more likely to establish the habit than making the session an hour long. Try to establish 10 minutes a day. By reflecting during development time, the human is reviewing what is in the computer and modifying it. As you will see in future chapters, this is critical to managing your chimp. What to do? During this time, you need to look back over the last 24 hours and reflect on how you've managed it. Keep a logbook and write only 1 or 2 lines for each day, which will help focus your mind on how you can improve the way that you do things or how you are thinking. It will also help you to work through the points raised in this book. An example. Here is a suggestion for the first few sessions. Try to improve your ability to recognize when your chimp is hijacking you with thoughts, feelings and behaviours that you don't want to have. By doing this, you're learning to recognize the difference between yourself and your chimp, and who is in control at any point in time. This will help to make clear that there are 2 brains operating within your head and only one of them is you. Chapter 2. The Divided Planet, Part 1. How to understand yourself and your chimp. The first of the 7 planet systems consists of the divided planet and the guiding moon. It represents your inner mind and the battle that goes on inside your head. This is the most important planet system in your universe, because if it's not in control, then it's unlikely that any of the other planets can function properly. The divided planet is where the human and chimp live. You and your chimp typically have an uneasy relationship that frequently involves compromise and conflict. It's often a battle for power between the 2 of you. As the chimp is far stronger than you are, it is wise to understand it and then nurture and manage it. To understand how you and your chimp work differently, we will approach this in a systematic way by looking at 4 aspects: ways of thinking, agendas, modes of operating, personalities. The first is 2 different ways of thinking. You and your chimp think in very different ways. As we go about our day, we are continually receiving information from around us. The human and chimp both receive this information and then interpret it. The chimp interprets this information with feelings and impressions. When it has got a feel for what is going on, it then uses emotional thinking to put things together and to work out what is happening and form a plan of action. All of this process is based on emotion. Emotional thinking means that the chimp makes guesses and fills in detail by assumptions that are typically based on a hunch, paranoid feelings or defensive thoughts. The chances, therefore, that the chimp will get the right interpretation as to what is happening may not be so good. However, sometimes the gut feeling it has is right. It can only think and act with emotion. The human, on the other hand, will interpret information by searching for the facts and establishing the truth. When it has done this, it will then put things together in a logical manner using logical thinking and form a plan of action based on this. So logic is the human's basis for thinking and acting. So if you imagine your head with 2 beings inside it, one of them, the chimp, is saying, I think emotionally and work with feelings and impressions. The other, the human, which is you, will be thinking, I think logically and work with facts and truth. Both processes can be healthy but lead to different interpretations of what is happening and how to deal with it. So if we can look at the ways of working and summarise this, we have two options. One is human and one is chimp. The human option is to find the facts and the truth as the basis for thinking, and then to use these in a logical way with logical thinking and form a plan and an action. The chimp, on the other hand, searches out feelings and impressions as the basis for thinking. It then puts these together in an emotional way with emotional thinking and forms a plan and an action. So whatever you're doing, there are two of you interpreting what is going on and forming an opinion as to what you should do. Sometimes the two of you agree on what to do and there's no problem, but often the two of you disagree. When you disagree, the chimp is the most powerful and therefore gets control of your thoughts and actions. However, if you recognise what's happening and have strategies for managing this, you will gain control of your thinking and then you can act in a logical manner. Let's start with a simple example to demonstrate the differences in thinking between the chimp and the human within the head of someone called John. We look at the scenario of John in the parked car. John is telling his wife Pauline that the man next door had blocked his car in by parking across the driveway and he had to go and tell the man to move the car. John, the human, is telling the story in a matter-of-fact way and his inner chimp is calmly listening. Pauline then responds by saying, "I don't know why you're making such a deal of it. It got sorted, didn't it?" John and his chimp have both heard this response but have very different interpretations and reactions to Pauline's comment. The human in John, being reasonable, may think, "I wasn't really making a deal of it, but clearly Pauline doesn't want to hear, so I'll just let it go." Or he might think, "It did get sorted, so she probably's got a point, and I need to move on and not react." The human has remained calm and has already moved on without a problem. The chimp in John, however, may react in a very different way. The chimp has taken the remark personally and has become agitated. It may interpret the comment as a direct criticism, and therefore the chimp will go into defence or attack mode. It is likely to raise its voice and say something like, "Why do you never support me?" Or, "I'm not making a deal of it, what's your problem?" Or, "I only made a comment that I thought you as my wife might be interested in." You can imagine how the conversation goes downhill from this point on. If we'd stopped the scenario after Pauline gave her remark and we asked John how he would like to respond, then it's likely he would choose to be human and let it go. However, as the chimp within us is far more powerful than the human, it's more likely that the chimp will speak before the human gets a chance to take control, and this will end up leaving John wondering why he didn't just let go of the remark in the first place. Let's have another example of the different thinking patterns between the human and the chimp. We'll look at Sarah and a comment. Rachel is at work when Sarah makes a comment to her saying that Rachel looks like she is tired. The message always goes to the chimp first. This is one of the rules of how the brain works. The chimp reacts in an emotional way and typically thinks it's being criticised, so it becomes agitated, possibly annoyed, possibly upset. It all depends on the nature of that particular chimp and what mood it is in. The chimp now uses emotional construction to understand the remark. So it may say something like, "She really means you're looking old," or "She's insinuating that you're not working hard enough." Or it may have other unhelpful or destructive interpretation. Alternatively, the chimp might think positively, such as, "She's concerned for me," or "She's probably right and I need to slow down a bit," or some other constructive thought. The human, on the other hand, if it were unsure of what was meant, would have calmly checked with Sarah what was being implied. It would have done this by establishing what the facts of the comment were. Then, having clarified what Sarah meant, it would have responded to it in a rational way. Now we can answer one of the questions posed at the start of the book. Why do I sometimes become so irrational in my thinking? The answer may now be clear. It is not you thinking at all, but your chimp taking over and thinking for you. The solution, therefore, is to understand how your chimp thinks, recognise when it's taking over and intervene. What you are experiencing when you have strong emotional reactions is very natural and the sign of a healthy mind. However, emotions can shift ground quickly, and therefore the chimp's thinking is relatively unstable and inconsistent. Therefore, the chimp is less predictable than the human when it comes to decision-making, and the process is often irrational. Because of this unpredictability, it is usually unhelpful to let the chimp think for us, so we need to address it. First, we will understand how a healthy inner chimp thinks. Understanding the chimp, emotional thinking. The basis of emotional thinking is impression and feeling. The chimp does not necessarily work with facts, but it works with what it believes is the truth, or with a perception of the truth, or even worse, with a projection of what might be the truth. It is quick to form an impression on little if any evidence, and usually won't give way. Of course, some impressions that the chimp gives us are accurate and helpful, but they can just as easily be wrong. Searching for some accuracy and truth would help us to reach a sensible conclusion. Your chimp typically forms first impressions when you meet new people by reading body language. If you know that your chimp is often wrong, then it can be helpful to see if a friend's chimp is more skilled in doing this and rely on them. We know that some people's chimps are naturally good at judging the character of people, whereas other chimps are not so good. Chimps like to work on feelings, and often start the conversations with, "but I feel," or "I don't feel like." Their feelings are very important to them, and they usually fail to recognise that all feelings come and go. Of course, it is good to have feelings from the chimp, and they can be a very useful indication for us to know what to do. However, they're not always reliable and can change quickly. So working with feelings can be helpful or unhelpful. Sometimes the human needs to say to the chimp, "I don't care how you feel, we have to do it." Or, "I don't care whether you're in the mood or not, it's not about mood." Here are some of the traits of emotional thinking used by the chimp. It jumps to an opinion, it thinks in black and white, it is paranoid, it is catastrophic, it's irrational, and it uses emotive judgement. Let's look at these individually. Jumping to an opinion. The chimp is fast to reach a conclusion and doesn't wait for all the information to come through before reaching its conclusion. The chimp forms an opinion based on its feelings and impressions, and then fixes its opinion. It then searches out evidence to back up its opinion and prove its point. In doing this, it typically twists the facts to fit its opinion and is very unreasonable and irrational if challenged. Thinking in black and white. Inner chimps are very much like children. They think in terms of black and white. They can be very unforgiving and will not discuss shades of grey. Adult humans are more able to appreciate that very little in life is black or white. As chimps think in black and white, they become very judgmental and are quick to respond. When you're thinking with your chimp, you tend to see only one possibility. Chimps don't usually consider alternative interpretations of what might be happening. Thinking with paranoia. The chimp needs to know that it's safe, so it is vigilant and continually looks for danger and therefore is prone to paranoia. It thinks that it's safer to be a bit paranoid and wary towards others or a situation than to relax and lose your life. Therefore, it's not unusual for our chimps to be suspicious of others and have some mistrust. The more vulnerable that a chimp feels, the more paranoid it will become in its outlook. Chimps that are insecure may read lots of things into harmless situations. They can also read intrigue and malice in comments or statements that others make, and then allow their imaginations to run wild. When the chimp has an opinion, it will become even more paranoid about defending it. The chimp will often take things out of context and also become very defensive. Dealing with paranoia in your chimp is a skillful business and will be addressed in the chimp management section. Catastrophic thinking. As chimps are constantly vigilant to danger, they tend to think catastrophically. They overreact to situations and fuel them with high and intense emotion. Whenever they perceive something is wrong, they have a tendency to start worrying about what might happen and then get things completely out of perspective. This frequently leads to terrible feelings of gloom and doom and stomach-churning moments. These moments are often linked to black and white thinking, which means you're left with a feeling that there's no way out, or there can be no way of recovering from what you're going through. The emotion the chimp then offers to the human is horrendous and extreme, causing much pain. Think how many times you've been through emotional turmoil at the hands of your chimp, only to look back wondering why you allowed yourself to be put through it. Irrational thinking. The chimp does not work rationally. It doesn't try to decide if something is likely or feasible, but typically jumps to conclusions and fills in missing details with anything it chooses. It can therefore become very unreasonable and end up looking foolish. If the chimp manages to get control of your mind and then interprets what is happening to you, the reasoning it offers is likely to be silly and unfounded. There will be little logic shown, if any at all. Sadly, this irrational approach will lead us into uncomfortable situations, and when the truth appears, we may want the ground to swallow us up. Let's look at an example of how the chimp works. Rob is waiting for his girlfriend Sally at a cinema, and they've agreed to meet at 8:30. The time is now 9 o'clock and there's no sign of her. His chimp has got control of him and is on the warpath. His chimp thinks emotionally. It's late, she's not told me what's happening, I'm wasting my time, I may as well go into the cinema, she isn't worth it, she's let me down, she shouldn't do this to me, she's humiliated me, I'm angry, I'm upset, and so it goes on. Suddenly Sally arrives, and before she has chance to say anything, his chimp attacks. Why have you turned up late? You've made me look like a fool. What's the point of going in now? It's too late. And many more attacks. Then he stops and Sally speaks. Someone is being knocked over just round the corner. I went to help, and they were using my mobile to get an ambulance and the police. I held the woman's hand as she lay on the floor. The ambulance came and then I rushed to get here. I'm sorry I couldn't let you know, but they were using my phone to get help. Now Rob feels pretty bad, and his chimp changes its emotion to being remorseful. But the damage is already done. This simple story represents how the chimp thinks very emotionally. It did not wait for the facts, but just made assumptions and got offended. In this case, the chimp got angry, but there are many other ways it could have responded and still left Rob acting inappropriately. This happens a lot to all of us if we don't manage our chimps. By managing our chimps, we would live in a very different world. Emotive judgement. Chimps judge others quickly and without mercy. Judgment is based on all of the criteria that it uses to think with. Therefore, it can be based on pure feelings or impressions, or on its own paranoia. These judgments are not open to reasoning, so the chimp is unlikely to be persuaded that it may be wrong. Chimps may also judge others to fulfill their own agenda, such as getting revenge or to wield power over someone. The chimp's basis for making decisions is by using emotional thinking. When we are thinking with the chimp, we use emotional thinking to piece together our ideas of what is happening. Very little logic, if any, is used, just emotional energy. So the chimp pieces together its irrational, black and white, catastrophic impressions, feelings and paranoia in an often nonsensical way to draw up conclusions and then a plan of action. The chimp does not use sound reasoning. It doesn't take a genius to see that this is not a good basis to work from. Thankfully, there is an alternative way of thinking, and we can learn to shift the blood supply in our brains in order to use this alternative. The alternative way is that of the human. Understanding the human, logical thinking. The basis of logical thinking is facts and truth. Humans begin to work out what is happening by first establishing the facts. They gather all the information available before beginning to make plans. Having gathered the facts, humans try to establish the truth and then base their beliefs on the truth. In society, we spend a lot of energy and discussion finding out the truth, whether it's about something serious or trivial. There is an innate human desire to reach the truth in all situations, and when the truth does not come out, it can cause distress to both the chimp and the human. Being misrepresented is a particularly unpleasant experience that humans try to rectify. and if this doesn't happen, then the chimp often joins forces with the human to demonstrate its annoyance. Here are some of the traits of logical thinking. The human's thinking is evidence-based, rational, in context and with perspective, and shows shades of grey with balanced judgment. Let's consider these 4 aspects of human thinking. Evidence-based. Humans work with evidence and they search for proof. They remain open-minded and have the ability to change their mind and to see someone else's point of view. They don't personalise their viewpoint or belief, and therefore they don't become defensive if challenged. Rational thinking. This is when we use common sense and decide if something is feasible and realistic. Ironically, rational thinking is often prompted by the chimp, which activates the human. The chimp does this by an intuitive prompt, a bell ringing in your head saying that something just doesn't sound true. However, the human must remain in charge and search for evidence to back up the chimp's prompt. If we don't do this and allow our chimp to take over, common sense disappears, and at some point in the future the chimp's prompt may work against us. We will then look back and say, what was I thinking? Thinking in context and with perspective. Keeping situations in context and perspective demonstrates human thinking. Wanting to understand how things came about and what was happening at the time is a human trait. This helps us to give actions and remarks a context. Humans also appreciate that all events come and go, and therefore gain a perspective on what is happening and how important it is in the scheme of things. Thinking with shades of grey and balanced judgment. Typically, when we are very young, we work by the chimp and see most things in black and white. Children demonstrate this by being quite harsh in their judgments of situations. Adult humans think in shades of grey. As adults, we learn to appreciate that there may be many factors involved when we're trying to understand something, and we accept that we may not have all of them in our possession. Therefore, we are less likely to judge harshly, and we're more likely to see things in shades of grey or not judge at all. We also modify our thinking with the experience that life gives us. Humans accept that they may be wrong and reflect on this, becoming more open to suggestions. They also accept that sometimes they may not reach the truth, there may not be an answer, or it may be just a matter of opinion. The human's basis for making decisions is by using logical thinking. Logical thinking means that we follow patterns of thinking that are linked and make sense, and then reason out conclusions on which we act. If someone is upset, for example, then we can say that there must be a reason for this. The counter-argument would also be true, that if someone experiences something unpleasant, then they're likely to become upset. There are several forms of logical thinking that we use. Examples include deducing things by going through steps, working with evidence and facts to reach a conclusion, following arguments by piecing together information, employing reasoning to work things out. So let's have a summary of the 2 different ways of thinking. Whenever we experience an event, there are 2 of us interpreting the event. The chimp interprets by using feelings and impressions, and then pieces together this information with emotional thinking and reaches a plan of action. The alternative is the human way of interpreting, where we search out facts and truth, then piece these together with logical thinking, and finally reach a plan of action. 2 different agendas. The purpose and agenda of the chimp is survival. The human's agenda is to achieve self-fulfillment. This is usually about becoming the person you want to be and achieving the things you want to achieve. The human will often search for the meaning of life. Many people might consider the human as having the soul or spirit of the person. As we consider the differences between the agenda of the chimp and the human, we will see why there is frequently a severe clash between the 2 beings. Understanding the chimp's agenda. The chimp's agenda is perpetuation of the species and self-survival. It also has other objectives. Perpetuation of the species and self-survival. The chimp may have many objectives, and these may vary at different times, but the main agenda of the chimp is to produce the next generation. It's nature's way of perpetuating the species. The chimp uses its sex drive along with other drives to try and fulfill this agenda. Therefore, your chimp has this drive high on its priority list. A strong sex drive indicates a healthy chimp. A very close second agenda of the chimp is self-survival, which includes protecting itself from harm. These two agendas of the chimp play a very big part in the way that it acts. All chimps are different and may have different agendas, but we will consider the typical chimp. These two extremely strong drives are common to all higher species, not just ourselves, and are necessary for survival of the species. Therefore, they must want to produce the next generation, or at least have some drives, such as the sex drive or a parental drive, that will result in the next generation being produced. We must also want to survive ourselves in order to do this. If the typical chimp is really pushed, it is quite likely to protect the species rather than protect itself. The black widow spider demonstrates this principle. Here there is a clash between the drive to produce the next generation and the drive to survive. The drive for the male to have sex and therefore perpetuate the species overrides his own safety, and he will mate with a female knowing that he is highly likely to be eaten if he can't escape quickly enough. We can also see this clash of drives in people, though hopefully not quite so dramatically. For example, those who have unprotected sex despite being in a situation where there's a high risk of contracting the HIV virus. Thankfully, with medication, this virus is not the killer that it once was. However, when it first arrived, people took incredible risks, knowing that this may have deadly consequences. For many people, the drive for sex cannot be underestimated. It is nature's way of ensuring the species continues. This is why some people who are in a loving relationship and wish to remain monogamous find it almost impossible to remain faithful. The human is saying and wanting one thing, and a chimp is saying and wanting another. Some other objectives. Clearly, the chimp will have other objectives that support species or individual survival, and these objectives may vary from time to time. Examples include attracting a mate, establishing a territory, searching for food, and finding shelter. We will cover the drives behind these agendas later in this chapter in the Jungle Centre section. Understanding the human's agenda. This can be thought of as being composed of a self-agenda, society agenda, and other objectives. The self-agenda. Human beings are very diverse about what they feel is their purpose in life. Some live a life that is based on establishing the basics of living and stop there. Other humans go on to try to gain self-fulfillment and satisfaction in life, which may be by helping others. Self-fulfillment can be achieved in many different ways, and it's really up to you to work out what it is that you want to do with your life. Everyone is unique, and there are no rights or wrongs here. Many people look at self-development, and it seems that those who work on this and on self-fulfillment are more likely to be content in life. One thing is clear, that having a purpose in life is something that humans thrive on. The society agenda. Humans are by nature typically social animals, although there are clear exceptions. One of the main agendas of the human is to build a society where humans can live in harmony and peace. This agenda is seen across all human societies. Therefore, humans by their nature will constantly try to establish society rules and society living. These rules are based on equality and opportunity and have been put there in order to contain the chimp within people. The human looks for justice and structure and works with ethical and moral principles to establish human rights and human values to live by. They are based on value judgments of right and wrong with consequences attached to them. Other objectives. Other human objectives vary greatly from individual to individual, but most are based around happiness and success, however these are defined. The problem with these agendas is that if we're not careful, the chimp takes them up and employs jungle laws to achieve them. For example, Humans would like businesses to be based on ethical principles and have an agenda to succeed. However, the chimp often takes over the human's agenda to succeed and mixes it with its own agendas and introduces bullying and intimidation and tries to fulfill its own ego or establish its own territory. Two different modes of operating. The chimp and human have different agendas, and to fulfill these they operate by using two very different principles. The chimp operates by the laws of the jungle, and it does this by having powerful drives and instincts. The human operates by the laws of society, and it does this by using powerful ethical and moral drives, typically with a conscience. By far, the biggest challenge for the individual human is to live with an animal within that is determined to live by the laws of the jungle and to use extremely powerful drives and instincts to fulfill its own agenda. Understanding the chimp, the jungle centre. The chimp operates with a jungle centre that is based on instincts and drives. The jungle centre is an area within the chimp's brain that gives the chimp the characteristics and attitudes needed to survive in a jungle. This centre contains beliefs and behaviours that work well in the jungle but not so well in a society. Major problems arise when the chimp applies its jungle drives in a human society. Here are some of the operational features of the jungle centre. The chimp operates with instincts, drives, a vulnerable stance, and uses body language. We'll also consider the differences between the male and female chimps. Instincts. An instinct is a built-in response or reaction, usually present from birth, to a particular stimulus or trigger. Instincts are in place to ensure that we survive. They are pre-programmed automatic behaviours and do not require us to have a say in what happens, they just need a stimulus. For example, when a baby is born, it has an automatic, instinctual response to being touched by a finger on the cheek. It will turn towards the finger and begin to suck. This suckling response ensures that when it is near a nipple, it will search out the nipple and suckle on it. All young animals have an array of instincts to help them survive. Your chimp uses very strong instincts to keep both it and you safe. The fight, flight or freeze response, which I call the triple F response, is arguably the most frequently used and most important instinct that our chimps possess. The entire animal kingdom shares this one particular instinct, and it's used every day by all species, including humans. This triple F instinct is nature's automatic response when danger or perceived danger threatens. The response takes place instantly in order to protect you. It's a very powerful reaction and it provokes intense emotion to make you act quickly. It's meant to evoke intense emotion because it's there to ensure survival in situations that can be life-threatening. In our psychological mind, it's the chimp that works with the triple F response and offers this to the human. Quickly choosing the right response is critical to survival. If you choose to fight when you should have run, then you wouldn't survive. Fight is taking on the threat, flight is running away from the threat, and freeze is keeping still and hoping the threat will go away and you won't be noticed. Freeze can also be interpreted as avoiding, siding with, or giving in to the threat in the hope it won't be too damaging. Which of the responses the chimp chooses depends on how vulnerable the chimp feels. So most chimps will choose flight and run away whenever they can, or they choose freeze to avoid any conflict. In the jungle, a chimpanzee's triple F instinct is a successful survival response. The problem for us as humans is that your inner chimp still believes it's in the jungle, and it tries to use this in everyday life. The use of the triple F mechanism is not always appropriate in modern-day society. For example, when we have to walk into a room full of strangers, many of our chimps start to go into flight mode and want to get out. Some go into freeze mode and try to remain unnoticed, while others may take on the fight mode and try to establish their presence. These responses occur because our chimp has sent a message saying, "I feel under threat and need to do something." Occasionally these responses become intense and cause us gross anxiety. In order to calm the chimp, the human needs to speak to it and use logic to reassure the chimp. Some people's chimps don't perceive any threat and therefore they have little, if any, reaction. If your chimp is trying to tell you to react to a situation and you don't respond in some way by choosing one of the triple F options or reassuring the chimp, then your body will naturally release adrenaline. When this adrenaline is coupled with negative thoughts, your chimp will go into an anxiety state. Anxiety in this example is nature's way of prompting us to make a decision when under threat. Anxiety typically occurs when you don't make a decision. It's a perfectly natural response from your chimp showing that it's healthy. The answer therefore is to make a decision or reassure the chimp. Nature therefore throws in anxiety as a means of forcing the chimp to make a decision. As the triple F response is about survival, the intensity of emotion is massive and typically out of proportion to the event. For example, if you have to give a public speech, you may experience gut-wrenching feelings and gross anxiety as the moment approaches. This is because the chimp has gone into the triple F response because it senses danger and is saying to you that this is a matter of life and death and you need to run away. Therefore, by thinking emotionally, it has a catastrophic reaction in order to make you safe. The reality is that it's not life and death, but the chimp doesn't know this. So when you're about to get up and speak, the chimp for many of us is typically going hysterical and saying, "What are you doing? This is a terrible danger and you're walking straight into it. You may lose your life." If you, the human, try to reassure the chimp, then it still comes back at you with, "But what if I look stupid? What if I make a mistake? What if it goes wrong?" And so it continues. The human, by contrast, is saying, "This is just a speech. I can deal with criticism. I can only do my best. Stop overreacting and stop getting things out of perspective," and so on. With these examples, we can begin to appreciate the struggle for thinking between the chimp and the human. Drives. Apart from instincts, the chimp has strong drives. A drive is something that compels us to get up and do something. If we didn't have drives, we would just sit around and do nothing. Drives fulfill needs that we have, both physical and emotional. The chimp has powerful drives such as sex, dominance, food, security, parental, territorial, and the search for a troop. The purpose of these drives is to perpetuate the species. Like instincts, drives are inbuilt, they're there from birth, but they don't require a trigger or stimulus. As drives are necessary for survival, their compelling nature makes them difficult to resist. For example, the drive to eat is extremely powerful, and your chimp will probably gorge itself, if food is available, because there may be no guarantee when the next meal will be. Again, the human within you will be saying that one donut is fine, whereas the chimp will crave as many as it can eat before it feels full, leaving the human to pick up the guilt. Arguably, female chimpanzees are more prone to having stronger feeding drives than males, possibly because they are normally pregnant or nursing a youngster. They therefore need to eat heavily in order to do this. A developing youngster within the womb can drain the mother's physical resources, and she needs to replace these quickly. In nature, the normal state for a female is to be pregnant or to be nursing, and therefore it would be no surprise if the eating drive were to be powerful. The inner chimp's drive for food is very healthy and normal. However, we're not in the jungle but in a society, and the strength of the eating drive becomes inappropriate. It therefore needs to be contained and managed carefully. Many people, men and women alike, suffer horrendously trying to manage their chimp's eating habits, and it can cause terrible distress with weight control problems. If the human understands the consequences of overeating and being overweight, but is happy with this, then there's no problem between the human and chimp. When the two disagree, there are significant inner battles taking place. Drives have to be strong in order to keep the species going and the individual alive, so they have strong reward pathways in the brain to enforce them. These pathways release chemicals that usually have a good or compelling feeling attached to them, and this makes the individual want to repeat the behaviour. Hence, eating food is a pleasurable experience that is not only part of a primitive drive to survive, but is also an addictive habit. When we begin to look at how drives impact on our day-to-day lives, we can see why there is a clash for power between the human and the chimp. Vulnerable stance. In the jungle, the chimpanzee is not at the top of the food chain, so it needs to keep constant vigilance. There are always leopards about. It's aware that it's potentially in danger at any moment. Therefore it relaxes only when it's fairly sure that it's safe, almost always when it's among the troop. As it's constantly looking for any danger, it's frequently on edge, gets easily upset or aggressive, and is typically emotionally unstable. This helps to explain why most inner chimps become anxious when they're unsure or are in unfamiliar territory. It's a very natural reaction from the chimp, warning them of potential danger. It's however inappropriate and unhelpful most of the time. It also helps to explain why many people search out hidden meanings from things that are said to them because their chimps are searching for potential threat. The chimp is insecure by nature. Male and female chimps. We could say there are two different types of chimp, male and female. Both of these emotional machines within us have drives and instincts. However, they serve different roles in the male and female, and therefore the emphasis on the drives is different, and they do not function in exactly the same way physically or psychologically within the brain. Every chimp is unique, but to help understand the chimp, we'll make generalizations about the typical male and female chimps. It's important to note that although male and female chimps differ considerably, male and female humans do not differ very much at all. There is also a great overlap between the characteristics of the male and female chimps. By considering this area of the differences between males and females, I'm not meaning to offend anyone, but it's based on physical and physiological differences found in the brains of men and women. For example, if we consider the amygdala, which is the emotional centre in the brain, we find that men have more connections from the right amygdala to the right side of the brain, whereas women have more left amygdala connections to the left side of the brain, so there is a significant difference in the way the two brains can operate. This helps us to understand where a lot of our emotions come from. It's also to help a significant number of people to appreciate that many of the emotional features within themselves that they may not like are not coming from them, but being imposed on them by their chimp. If we think of the purpose of the female and male in the jungle, it then becomes apparent why specific drives and instincts need different emphases. In nature, the male chimpanzee must be muscled up and strong, and he must impress the female and the troop to give them security. He will walk the boundaries of the territory that he must protect every day, with only the males from his troop. The female chimpanzee is only half his size and is no match for his strength. However, she can be strong and aggressive if the need arises. This means that she must be wary of the male and be very good at weighing up his mood and anticipating his actions. In other words, she can read body language extremely well. She needs to do this to protect herself. The male chimpanzee must be driven sexually, otherwise if he's indifferent the species will fail. He can be good or bad as a father. He will, however, see the female as his property and ward off other males. The female must have a strong maternal drive and stay close to the male if she's to get his genes and fulfill her maternal drive. By staying close to the male, she will remain safer from predators as he's physically stronger. He'll remain with her to obtain sexual gratification. The female chimpanzee has an amazingly powerful maternal drive, otherwise the young would not survive. She'll protect her young to the death if need be. She also has a strong nesting instinct to provide shelter for the young. If you think about it, a female chimpanzee that is highly insecure is the one that is most likely to survive and be vigilant enough for their offspring to survive. A confident female chimpanzee is probably not going to make it. It seems reasonable then that female inner chimps are frequently lacking in confidence and wary. They can be quick to become anxious and therefore avoid decision-making for fear of getting it wrong. Some women complain bitterly that they find decision-making difficult, even just choosing what to wear. They then beat themselves up because they don't like this aspect about themselves. In reality, it's not an aspect of them at all. It's merely an out-of-control chimp that they can learn to manage. The woman is easily capable of making decisions. her emotional chimp is just hijacking her. The reason that I mention this is that over the years I've met many distressed women who seek help to understand why they lack the confidence to make decisions or constantly put themselves down. I'm hoping that by understanding their inner chimp, they will come to realise that these features are not coming from them, but from their chimp. It's natural for the inner chimp to be uncertain, but it's very destructive for the woman. And clearly there are men who also suffer similarly. The chimp needs managing so that the individual can be free from these influences. Key point. The human male and human female are extremely similar, but they're being influenced by their inner chimp, which is more typically male or female in character. Hormones enforce these differing roles by boosting the genes and systems within the brain. Men and women both have levels of estrogen and testosterone. The main female hormone, estrogen, functions to promote maternal drives, nesting instinct, and passivity. The main male hormone, testosterone, gives a high sex drive, aggression, and builds muscle. Many years ago, before the practice became illegal, male prisoners were given estrogen, which calmed them down and made them more passive. The estrogen given may have calmed them down but had some odd side effects. Understandably, breast development is not usually welcome in males. Different emphasis rather than male and female. So the differences between male and female inner chimps are based on the roles that they play in perpetuating the species and in looking after themselves, along with the hormones that fuel these drives. The drives and instincts are different in that they are given different emphases, but there is a great deal of overlap. It would be wrong to say that certain characteristics are male and certain female, but rather that some characteristics are found more frequently in females than in males, and vice versa. There are, therefore, no specific characteristics that are purely male or purely female. Also, therefore, it would imply that there is not a feminine side to men or a masculine side to women, there are just characteristics. So we need to emphasise that the human male and female are very similar. However, the inner chimps of a male and female are very different emotional machines. Understanding the human, the humanity centre. The humanity centre is based on ethics and morals and is the part of the brain in the human that lights up on a brain scanner when we show the characteristics of what it takes to live in a society. So, for example, when people show empathy or guilt, this centre will light up because it receives an increased blood supply and uses more oxygen to function. This demonstrates that it's activated. This centre contains the unwritten rules of humanity. Here are some of the operational features of the humanity centre. Honesty, compassion, conscience, law-abiding, self-control, sense of purpose, achievement and satisfaction. It has to be said that not all humans possess these qualities, as some humans are inherently unpleasant and dishonest. However, generally, the humanity centre gives the potential for these qualities to emerge. Honesty. Being honest and showing integrity is necessary for a society to work. Humans show sincerity and truthfulness in varying degrees, along with loyalty and reliability. Compassion. The basis of society is compassion, an empathy and understanding of what others are going through, and altruistic selfless support for them are the hallmarks of a developed society. How human society treats its most vulnerable members sets us apart from most animal societies. Conscience. Having a conscience is a cornerstone for a human. Without a conscience, we lack remorse and fail to develop ourselves. The presence of a conscience gives rise to feelings of guilt and shame, which can lead to regret and the desire to change or to make recompense. Interestingly, much research has been done on a personality generally known as a psychopath. There is a substantial body of scientific evidence to show that in psychopathic individuals, they either don't have this humanity centre or it just doesn't switch on. The individual, therefore, effectively has no conscience. Law-abiding. Societies have laws, whether they're written and stated or whether they're unwritten but acted out. Humans are law-abiding and accept responsibility and accountability for their actions, but in varying degrees. You cannot blame the chimp for causing all of your problems. Sometimes it's a human that rationally decides to break the rules and stifle its conscience. Self-control. Self-control is probably the biggest factor that marks us out from the chimpanzee. The real chimpanzee works on impulse and lacks emotional control. These two factors are arguably the two main factors that keep a real chimpanzee in the jungle. Humans have the potential to control impulse and emotion that the inner chimp is throwing at them. The inner chimp has little self-control and demands immediate gratification, whereas humans can delay rewards and can choose not to work with impulse and emotion. This factor is graphically demonstrated in the Stanford marshmallow experiment. This experiment on preschool children has been replicated in various forms and consistent results found. In essence, children were offered a marshmallow to eat but told that if they waited, they would receive more marshmallows at a later time. The children who delayed eating the marshmallow were found to be more successful in later life, and those who could not control their impulse for immediate gratification were less successful. Key point. Managing your impulsive emotional chimp as an adult will be one of the biggest factors determining how successful you are in life. Sense of purpose. Humans work best when they have a sense of purpose. It doesn't seem to matter what it is as long as there is one. Without a sense of purpose, the human lacks direction and meaning to life. Achievement and satisfaction. These are two qualities that the human seems to be fulfilled by. Generally, achievement and satisfaction are dependent on the sense of purpose. They can come from a career, work, or leisure activities. Two different personalities. We will look at your personality and how it can be changed in greater detail later on, once we have a full picture of the entire psychological mind. Here I just want to remind you that there are two distinct personalities in your head, you and your chimp. They operate via two different brains which are trying to work together. They may have similar personalities or they may be very different. If one of them gets control of the decision-making, then this personality will dominate, and this is what you will present to the outside world. Recognizing the two different personalities will help you to understand yourself better and also to manage each of them to get the best out of both. Most people can recognize that when they are not emotional but calm, they think and behave quite differently to when they are emotional and under stress. Summary key points. You, the human, have a personality, agenda, and humanity center. You think logically and work with facts and truth. Your chimp has a personality, agenda, and jungle center. It thinks emotionally and uses impressions and feelings. The chimp is an emotional machine that will hijack you if you allow it to. It's not good or bad, it's a chimp. It can be your best friend or your worst enemy, and this is the chimp paradox. Here is a suggested exercise. Learning to understand yourself and your chimp. Choosing the chimp or the human. In order to implement changes in your life, it's important to recognize the differences between the chimp and the human in terms of agendas, thinking, and operating methods. Look back at situations that have happened during your day and revisit them and work out the different ways that the chimp and human could have handled them. Emotional or logical thinking. For example, consider a common scenario where someone may have said something that disturbed or troubled you and how you responded to it. If you later thought that your response was unhelpful, think through how the chimp responded and then think through how the human could have responded. Remember that the human will choose to establish the facts and then gain perspective before reacting. Relate the way your chimp reacted by using typical chimp operating methods, and then consider how a human response would have been more appropriate. Use this chapter as a reference to compare the modes of thinking. time spent thinking. The amount of time you spend reflecting on how your mind is operating, the more likely it is that you will improve your future functioning.
Thank you for listening. To continue the book, head to the link in the description below. And click here to subscribe to the Penguin YouTube channel for more audiobook samples and videos with your favourite authors. See you next time.